Hello everybody, I'm Alyssa from Meditative Astrology. Today we're going to walk through the astrology of July 19th through 25th. We have a few things to talk about this week. We're going to walk through the week day by day. Before we do, if you haven't already, go ahead and hit the subscribe button so that way you don't miss anything that we have going on here. These weekly videos, they come out every Saturday morning so that way you can have them ahead of the upcoming week to sit with and really just think about how you could see that playing out within your life. And then Sunday nights, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, we host a live astrologically guided meditation where really the whole goal and intention of that is to take the astrology upcoming week, maybe take some of your contemplations from the weekly video, and then come to that quiet, meditative, contemplative space where you can really lean into the energies and create personal conversations with the astrology. When we bring it down to that personal level where we come into silence and we contemplate the things that are going on into our lives and we're able to correlate it with the astrology that's coming up, or when we're aware of the astrology that's going on and then things pop up through the week, we recognize them in astrological terms and meanings. And it can just bring the astrology a lot closer and a lot more meaningful through that. So that's all here on YouTube. If you find us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, that's where other miscellaneous posts, announcements, and updates. Sometimes there's changes to the meditation schedule. Every Friday there is a weekly intention that's released that goes directly with the meditation. Really my goal is to give you a process through the weekend. Friday with the weekly intention, Saturday with the weekly video, and then Sunday with the weekly meditation to really prepare and again create those conversations and then in return those personal relationships with the astrology. The transits are above all of us. Yes, that is true, but they're all working with us and interacting and communicating with all of us in different ways. So we all have different lives, different charts, different karma, different circumstances, different perspectives. So really bringing it down to that personal level is really my goal here at Meditative Astrology. So with that being said, let's connect on all of the things and we're going to go ahead and walk through this week here, shall we? We start out the beginning of the week on Sunday, July 19th, following the moon around. Starts out in the sign of Virgo. It's going to move into the sign of Libra, and it's going to oppose Neptune after it does so. And that Libra moon is going to take us right into Monday, July 20th. We don't have any exact planetary aspects that are going on here this day either. What I do want to point out is that at the beginning of this week here, we still have Jupiter sitting at 4 degrees of Leo. So if you missed last week's video where we talked about Jupiter interacting with the outer planets, making an opposition to Pluto, making a trine to Neptune in Aries, and then making a sextile to Uranus in the sign of Gemini, those aspects are still in play here at the beginning of the week, and we talked about how there was going to be about a week where those are active. So if you missed that video, go back and check that out because that is still all well within play here at the beginning of this week. So just throwing that out there. So there we are Monday with that Libra moon taking us through the full day. It's going to go ahead and square Mercury. And then we're going to go forward into July 21st. Now we usually just kind of make note of the lunar aspects. I don't usually break them down because they are very individual for all of us. And sometimes they'll speak loudly to some of us, sometimes they won't. It just depends on everything that's going on within the chart. But here on Tuesday, we have an interesting aspect with the sun, with the moon in the sign of Scorpio. So I'm actually going to go ahead and put the chart up just so that way you can see these lunar aspects that come through between 6 and 7 p.m. Eastern time. So I'm going to go ahead and put the chart up here, and what you're seeing right now is the chart for about 6 p.m. It's just before these lunar aspects come in. Take a look at the moon sitting at 4 degrees of Scorpio. It's squaring Jupiter in the sign of Leo, and it's squaring Pluto in the sign of Aquarius. You can find Pluto and Jupiter across the 3rd and 9th house axis in this chart, and the moon in the 12th house here. So when the moon is squaring both of these planets that are in opposition, what that does is gives us a T-square formation. You have two planets that are in opposition to each other, and then you have another one that is sitting at 90 degrees to those planets. So this is a lunar aspect that we have going on here. And then at the same time, we have the moon activating an aspect pattern. These aspect patterns are more of a modern astrology take. I know that you are all used to me using more traditional astrology transits and aspects, things like that. But I think that all of these happening at the same time is really, really important here. And sometimes I do bring in some of the more modern things when it feels appropriate. So just putting that out there. So while we have this T-square with the moon, we also have an aspect pattern that is called a Yod coming through here with the moon as well. What a Yod is two planets that are in sextile to each other, and then at the opposite end of the chart, you have a planet that is what is considered to be in the quincunx position, or 5 signs away from the other signs. And really what a quincunx is like a non-aspect. In traditional astrology, we look at the traditional aspects, and then outside of that are areas where there's not really a line of sight from one sign to another. That is what the quincunx describes, is a non-aspect aspect only, almost, when you look at it in traditional terms. So the quincunx that we see here is the moon, okay? If you take a peek at Neptune and Uranus, they are in a sextile to each other. You can find that through the 5th house with the sign of Aries and Neptune there, and then in the 7th house, you'll find Uranus at 4 degrees of Gemini. So those 2 planets are in a sextile to each other. The moon is 5 signs away, or in the quincunx position. So it's technically not making a traditional, a traditional aspect. However, in the modern aspect schemes and patterns that we have, this would be considered a Yod, or sometimes called the finger of God. So we have 2 of these aspect patterns that the moon is activating at the same time. And without going into very great detail about these different aspect patterns that we see here, both of these patterns have a planet that act as an apex, or a point of tension, or a place of activation for the other points. But it's usually a little bit of a scratchy place. It's a little bit of a challenge. That activating planet in both of these aspects is the moon here. So the moon is the focal point, acting as the activating planet. And for some of us, we may find ourselves in circumstances that give us a certain space to be able to alter or pass through tensions of some kind. Integration is key with these aspects, yet it can be difficult because of challenges or opposing views, or planets that in traditional aspect theory don't have a line of sight to each other and are not able to talk to each other in case of the Yod. When we look at the T-square, we're looking at aspects that have more tension or difficulties to them. So we're looking at a planet that is in square to 2 other planets. We're looking at 2 planets that are in opposition to each other. So the opposition acts as like a push and a pull. So they want to come together, but there's ways that they are just pushing away from each other at the same time. So this could be a source of tension for some of us, but it could also be an invitation to problem solve and to work through difficulties. Lunar aspects are quick, but they can be activators. So I think for some of us, depending on where this hits in our chart, especially if you have something around 4 degrees of these signs, you may find that there's certain circumstances or situations that feel like they are activated around this time. So it's just something that I think is good for all of us to pay attention to here. For the second half of Tuesday are these lunar tensions that could be coming through. And the moon represents the environment that we find ourselves in, our emotions, and the overall space that we find ourselves in. The moon and the time of these aspects is in the sign of Scorpio, so it's debilitated. Its opposite is sign of exaltation in the sign of Taurus. So really the moon is considered to be in its fall. It's depressed, it's debilitated. So that feels like it could add to some of the difficulty for some of us. For some of us, it will be overcoming challenges, and it has us able to rise up in some way. And for some of us, it will just not even notice it, because those lunar transits go fast, and depending on what you have going on your chart and everything else that's moving around and shaking here at the same time, that Jupiter is part of all of this too, these outer planet aspects that we talked about last week. So there really is a lot kind of behind the scenes that is activated here still at the beginning of the week. even without having exact planetary aspects coming through at the beginning of this week. So the exact square from the moon to Pluto is at 6:10 p.m. and the exact square to Jupiter is at 6:49 p.m. All times are always Eastern here. So that's what we have for Tuesday. Again, we don't always look at the lunar things, but I feel like that is something that is important for us to point out here this week. Then we move forward into Wednesday, July 22nd. The sun is going to move into the sign of Leo. The moon is still in the sign of Scorpio. So happy birthday to all of you Leo suns. Your sun sign season is coming up here. I want to take note of the incoming aspects that the sun coming into the sign of Leo is going to make. All of those aspects that Jupiter is making to the outer planets, the sun is going to go through that same formation. That also means that the sun is moving towards a conjunction with Jupiter. So they are now co-present and they are just a few degrees away from each other. And they're going to come into their exact conjunction next week. So as soon as the sun enters the sign of Leo and is applying to that conjunction with Jupiter, and honestly, even a little bit before that, Jupiter is in this process of being reborn. And in order to be reborn, there has to be some sort of death. There has to be something that is let go or something that is shed, right? So Jupiter is going through this death and rebirth process here as the sun is entering the sign of Leo, and these other aspects are going to follow suit here early next week, and they're going to be applying here as we move through this week here. So some of these aspects that we have coming through here may be having us exploring personal knowledge of some kind, understandings and teachings surrounding the heart. This is surrounding Sun and Jupiter themes. The sun is in its home sign in the sign of Leo. So the sun is very, very strong here in the sign of Leo. There are themes of authenticity and wanting to balance having our voice being heard without, overpowering others. That can be a difficult part of Leo. Think about how the sun in its domicile in this is the middle of summer, right? Even though the light of the sun is slowly decreasing, Leo is the fixed sign in the season of summer. You can see it from the northern hemisphere perspective, but it's also according to the solar story of the sun moving from the sign of Aries through the sign of Pisces each year. So the sun is very, very strong here. There's a strong solar self that is on display, which brings out those themes of authenticity and wanting to be able to be heard and wanting to be able to portray ourselves the way that we really, really want to be able to be seen here. Jupiter is in this process of being reborn, so there's new processes that are coming through here with the sun and Jupiter at the beginning of Leo for both of these planets. This Leo season is going to be more than just the sun moving through Leo because of these aspects that it's making. It's traveling with Jupiter. It's making this opposition to Pluto. So this space that is often about radiance and light and allowing ourselves to shine, which it very much still is, there's going to be lessons that are around that. There's going to be knowledge and teachings and understandings that can come through. There's going to be digging deep down with that Sun-Pluto opposition here. So maybe we see, maybe if we have been in the little bit of the Leo shadow side in some sort of way, whether it's where the house topic is or planets that we have in the sign of Leo, maybe we start to notice areas where we've been a little grandiose within our personality, a little bit too much. Maybe we are, not allowing other people to shine, or maybe we are being a little self-centered or a little bit selfish. Or if just the opposite, if you have been suppressing your light or your light feels like it's dim and it needs to liven up and it needs to come forward, then maybe there's lessons and understandings of your light is your truth and your truth is valid and you are able to bring that forward, right? So then the strength from Pluto can come through where it's like, you are enough. You are enough being who you are. Now stand on the stage of your life and be your enoughness, right? It can be something just as simple as that. The sun in Leo is authentic, it's regal, and it's powerful in its strength. It invites us to stand tall within our own agency and ability, but for the greater good, right? At its best, Leo can allow its own light to shine, but then it allows others' light to shine at the same time, right? So Leo is very good about lifting other people up and allowing them to be able to show their light, but Leo wants to be able to do the same thing too. So it's like, Leo is the one sign that I feel gives a very good lesson of like, I can't pour from an empty cup. So like my cup has to be full in order to fill your cup up. So like you can stand on the stage and you can have your spotlight, but it's also important that I have my spotlight too, and I can get to stand up here and do my thing as well here, right? So Sun moving through the sign of Leo feels like it's going to have lots of solar lessons coming through here with the aspects, and it's like right there at the beginning of Leo season here. So yeah, you know, and then we have, you know, we have the solar eclipse that's going to come through in August in the sign of Leo. So really, this feels like the starting or the activation of a longer trek through the Leo energy within all of our lives. So we're looking at Jupiter moving through Leo for the next year or so, and then we have the eclipses that are going to be coming through a little bit longer than that. So there's a lot to be seen, and there's a lot to be experienced in the Leo areas of our life for all of us. With that being said, happy birthday to all of you Leo suns out there. So there we are on Wednesday the 22nd. And then if we go ahead and move, if I back up to Wednesday, I think it's interesting to note that the moon is still in the sign of Scorpio, so it's in that depressed position that we talked about for Tuesday. So the sun, at the time that the sun moves into the sign of Leo, into its domicile and its home sign where it's strong and it's allowed to shine forward, the moon is depressed at the same time. So it's almost like there's this way in which when Leo enters, so if we look at the moon being feminine and we look at the sun being masculine, it's almost like there's this moment where the stage is set specifically for the sun to be able to shine. And I know the sun often outshines, but it's almost like the moon steps aside for a moment and steps into this little bit darker place and maybe a little bit more shadowy space, so that way the light can step forward. It almost feels like when you open the door and there's like just this blinding, beautiful, brilliant white light that is there, and like that's kind of all you can see at the moment. So I just thought that was a little interesting tidbit here. So moving on to Thursday, July 24th, we start out with that Scorpio moon again. It's going to move into the sign of Sagittarius, and it's going to square the lunar nodes as well. But again, no major aspects that we have going on here. We move forward into Friday, July 24th. Mercury is going to be moving into the direct position, so Mercury retrograde is over. Wednesday, Thursday, Mercury is going to be stationing, so some of those communicative and resource things could be coming through pretty strong here at the stationing moment. Mercury is going direct in the sign of Cancer, so it's in the place of the moon sign, while the sun is still activating, and the sun is like lighting up in different ways. So it feels like this is another connection between the sun and the moon here, as Mercury is shifting into the direct position here. It may feel like our story shifts, even if slightly, through the plot line and the environment, and the setting shifts for some of us. So we can look at just very basically as the sun representing the plot line and the moon representing the environment when you're looking at a birth chart or a transit chart or something like that. So it's this space here where Mercury coming through, moving direct in the place where the moon is, in the place of environments, in the place of emotions, in the space which we want to be able to grow from, is taking a turn as the sun steps into the space where it's able to be illuminated, it's able to be enlightened. So maybe there's this way in which the circumstances and the environment that we are finding ourselves in takes a turn, takes a shift, or there's something there's some sort of illumination here, right? Like the sun has just moved into the sign of Leo as Mercury's going direct, and it's transiting from the sign of Cancer, where Mercury is, into the sign of Leo, where the sun is at home, while Mercury is stationing to go direct here. So that is what Mercury direct represents. When Mercury is retrograde, we are revisiting, revising, and we're maybe muddling through new processes that are starting to come through, but there's still old things that are kind of finishing up, and we're not quite sure the direction that we're going. There's not a whole lot of clarity. Once Mercury gets to be direct, it is far enough away from the sun to have a little bit of its own agency and start moving in the forward motion. It's like, okay, I know the direction that I'm going now. At the same time, where the sun has that like big open door, brilliant light, right? So it could feel a little more amplified of that like moving forward type energy here. This forward motion as Mercury emerges from under the beams of the sun, or the influence of the sun as the morning star. New things are ready to be heard as Mercury moves direct here. We may be able to see the process ahead or the steps to be able to take them more clearly. Like I said, Mercury has been under the beams of the sun and influenced by the sun up until this point here. So now it's starting to come away. We're going to start to be able to see it as the morning star here soon, and it's going to start to be able to bring in some of its own ability and its own agency. Morning star Mercury is very excited, it's very youthful, and it's ready to explore and ready to grow. Growing being a Cancer theme as well, because Cancer gives us that tender, nurturing space, to like space of emotional safety to be able to go from. So forward motion in regards to the Cancer house and the lunar themes within our chart. So look at the house where you can find the sign of Cancer, and then think about those lunar themes, since the moon rules the sign of Cancer. So those places of origin, the memory body, the physical body, the conscious and unconscious mind, our emotions. Sometimes feminine figures can come in. So women, children, sisters, daughters, things like that can come in. The environment and the spaces that we find ourselves in, our own emotional integrity in the sign of Cancer, all of the origin things of where we came from. So our ancestry, as well as our own personal history and origin, like what is our own personal history? That's where some of the memory body and the conscious and unconscious conditionings can come through the moon. So any of these things could feel like there's a forward movement or a forward motion here. At the same time, Venus is sextiling Mercury here as Mercury is stationing to go direct. Let me go ahead and put the chart up just so that way you all can see this, just to get the little bit of a visual. So this chart is still set for Tuesday, and I'm just going to go ahead and bop it forward to Friday here without any specific time. You can see Mercury stationing direct. There's a little S underneath it here. In the 8th house in the sign of Cancer, and then you can find Venus in the 10th house in the sign of Virgo in the at the 16th degree as well. This is a sextile, so this is helpful and cohesive. I like to remember that Venus is depressed in the sign of Virgo, so it's opposite its exaltation of Pisces, so this is where it's in its fall. Similar like how we talked to the moon being in its fall in the sign of Scorpio. So Venus is depressed in the sign of Virgo. It's not all bad, but it's not the best environment for Venus to be in, right? If you go back a couple weeks back when Venus entered the sign of Virgo, we talked about that in that video as well. Mercury is in the superior position, which means that Mercury has a little more to say in this aspect here. And simply how you can find out which planet is in the superior position is if you are standing in the planet's position. So picture yourself being Mercury and you're like looking in towards the middle of the wheel. The aspect that is given off to the right, so Venus is to Mercury's right-hand side when Mercury is looking towards the center of the wheel. That is the planet that is in the superior position. It's the sign that rises first, is the planet that's going to be in the superior position. And that planet has a little bit more to say. It's like the planet that's in the superior position is speaking, and the planet that is in the inferior position is listening and responding in some sort of way here. So if Venus is depressed here and Mercury is recently stationing to go direct and is emerging from under the beams of the sun as in this morning star phase where it's youthful and experimental and it wants to go out there and experience new things, I'm wondering about how Mercury can help from this superior position, help Venus, which is a little bit down here in this sign. It's not that Mercury has any specific dignity in the sign of Cancer, but that shift change and that phasal change for Mercury really amps up its energy here. So I'm just wondering if we can get a reminder from Mercury here, who has recently switched its perspective or its condition or its circumstances, that we can shift our circumstances often, or at least shift our mindset and our reaction to them. That's very much like Mercury stationing to go direct. Like, I can change my mind. I can choose how I'm going to respond to whatever the situation is here. And there's a little bit of reception because Mercury, it rules the sign of Virgo, where Venus is. Venus doesn't necessarily have any dignity in the sign of Cancer, but it feels a little bit more of a Venusian space, being that it's water and it's the moon sign. There's similarities between the moon and Venus. Think about how Venus rules Taurus and then the moon is exalted in the sign of Taurus. They're the two feminine planets that we have, right? So there's some affinity between these two planets. So Cancer feels like a space. If Mercury is speaking to Venus from a Cancer space, it feels like a space that could give Venus something that will soften her edges a little bit in the sign of Virgo, or maybe lessen a little bit of the anxiety that can come up here with Venus in the sign of Virgo. So it's like Venus's concerns here are items that maybe Mercury can help with in some sort of way. Maybe there's a attentive, supportive conversation that can shift the perspective and uplifts, or maybe there's resources that are helpful, or, you know, even meaningful or nurturing, or, you know, tending to those sensitive spaces that are within all of us here. You know, maybe there's conversations of origin, memory, body, and emotional integrity in the spaces we've come from. Maybe we can ease some of this anxiety that can sometimes come through with Venus in the sign of Virgo here at the sextile. So I feel like this little sextile is more helpful maybe for Venus than Mercury, because Mercury is in a little bit better position here, starting to emerge as the morning star, and it has a little bit of that exuberance, and there's a hopefulness that can come with a newly emerged morning star too. There can be a little bit of a naiveness that can come through as well, just because there hasn't been quite the learned experiences, but that youthful, childlike energy could feel really uplifting to Venus in the sign of Virgo here right now. So those are our major players that we have coming through here for this week. We go ahead and move forward from Friday into Saturday, and we don't have any exact aspects that are coming through here either. That Sagittarius moon will take us through the full day here. So Mercury stations to go direct is our big one, and the sun moves into the sign of Leo is also huge because of all of the aspects that it's going to make here this week. These are both shifts for all of us, where there's going to be a shift of focus within our chart. Maybe in the sign of Cancer, there's been some things that have been reworking and we have been mulling over in our head in some sort of way. Now we can start to move forward with them. The sun has been highlighting the sign of Cancer, and now it's going to be highlighting the sign of Leo. And again, it's going to be activating those aspects that are going to be coming up. And we will talk more about them next week as they come through exact. So this is what we have here for this week. I hope this video has been helpful, beneficial, and giving you something to contemplate on. And come join us for our live meditation, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, Sunday nights, astrologically guided meditation. And if you've made it all the way through this video and have not yet subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so that way you don't miss anything that we have going on here, and we can walk this astrologically journey together if you so choose to. I hope everybody has a wonderful day, a wonderful week, and I will see you next time. Take care and bye-bye.